Hello, everybody. As you heard, I'm Kelly Grosklags, and we are all in this very interesting time with our virtual conference. I'm sure many of you have heard already from the speakers that this is kind of a fascinating way for us to present. We're getting used to it because we've been doing it for a couple months. But since my topic is cumulative grief, I'll start off with one of my greatest griefs in regards to this conference is that I can't be with you in person. I get so much out of the LBBC conference, the Metastatic conference, and I think this is my 4th year participating. So a huge congratulations to the staff of LBBC and the volunteers that actually were able to pull this off. This is not a small endeavor. But I want to say that I think it's important to acknowledge that we're all experiencing a loss in our own way around this, and that it's okay. Now, there may be some of you that are grateful for this platform because it was possible that you couldn't come to the conference for various reasons. And so this may actually be a welcomed experience for you, and that's okay too. You know, we all get to have our experiences to this, and so I'm hoping that the virtual conference may reach people that it couldn't reach before. So that is the part of this that I'm grateful for. But nevertheless, I'm sad because we don't get to experience that love and the support and the actual community grief in person. But we can experience the best way we can right now. So welcome to my session on cumulative grief. Before we start, I was going to do this in person. And this is something all of you can actually do. It's a very simple ritual, but it is a beautiful ritual to do. So it's just a candle. And I am going to light this candle for 2 reasons today. I'm going to light this candle for the 116 people that will die today of metastatic breast cancer. And may light shine on their families and their friends and those that love them. And then I want to light this candle for each one of you that are speaking at this conference, but also for all of you that are watching this conference. Light is something that's universal across all cultures and all countries, meaning that it can bring something to darkness. And we are living in a very dark moment right now in this time. Not only do we have COVID, but I'm recording this on June 2nd, which is right in the heart of a lot of our riots and different things going on in our country. So I want to say that I'm going to keep this lit, and this is for you. And this is for all the brothers and sisters that you come here today to mourn and to remember. So cumulative grief, what is that? Well, in my work as a grief therapist and as an end-of-life practitioner, it is like mounds and mounds of loss. And they're quieter grief, they're quieter losses, they're really loud losses. You yourself get to decide what is a loss for you. And I will say that if the loss is happening to you, in that moment, it is the hardest loss because it's happening to you. The one thing we don't want to see is people comparing and judging, particularly of themselves. Why do I feel this way? It's not like somebody died. Why do I feel this way? I've been through this before. We don't really necessarily want to ask the word why when it comes to grief. We just want to embrace it. We just want to embrace the loss. And so cumulative grief is at those moments where we say, I just don't know if I can handle one more loss. I think a lot of us are feeling that right now. We came out of a time, we're not even out of the time of quarantine. And now we're dealing with violence and unsafety and all these different issues within our country. And I'm hearing a lot of people say, I just don't know if I can handle one more thing. Now, I don't speak to you today as somebody that has lived with breast cancer, okay? I want to be very clear that what I know, my knowledge around this comes from you and comes from the 25 plus years of working in oncology and attending conferences such as this one and learning beautiful things from the people that do live with breast cancer. So when I speak today, I want you to know that I have learned from the greatest teachers, which are the men and the women who've lived with metastatic breast cancer. I would say I've mostly worked with metastatic breast cancer. When it comes to breast cancer, I've worked with all stages. But in my practice in Minneapolis, I tended to get mostly referrals for people who have metastatic. I work with all cancers, but when it comes to breast cancer, I feel like MBC is the one that I've been taught the most about. So here you have metastatic breast cancer and all these things going on in the world. So it's cumulative. What's important isn't necessarily that we attach, why are we feeling this way to this? And is this metastatic cancer or is this what's going on in the world? The important part is that we embrace and that we name it and that we say it. And I think sometimes it can get so overwhelming when, and I also have a lot of empathy because in people's lives right now, there's things like PET scans going on. There's things like tumor markers, treatment changes, possibly having conversations about entering hospice and that the clinical trial didn't work. So in life right now, just at baseline, so to speak, with metastatic breast cancer, there are multiple avenues to go down that could be bringing up grief. And it's okay if right now you feel abandoned by maybe your family or people in the community because everyone is so focused on what's going on in the world. Please don't feel bad about that. That is so understandable. And my apologies to people who are feeling that. What we have to sometimes say to our support people is we have to remind them that what's going on in our lives right now feels really hard and feels, we feel really uncertain about things. And so it's okay for you to speak up. You don't, again, as I said earlier, it is the hardest because it's happening to you. And so even if the entire world feels like it's falling apart, your world is just as worthy of getting love and attention. And so I want to make sure I bring that up. Sometimes when we've had so much trauma and so much loss, people they're not able to cope with their own because everybody else's focus is on the external or what's going on in the outside world. We do have to bring it back to our own lives as well. And we do have to, and we can do both, and we can both advocate, donate, support this world going on outside of us, and also continue to honor what our story is, because our story doesn't stop because the rest of the world is falling apart. So it's really important. Now I want to talk about quarantine. And what I'm seeing with people living with metastatic disease, that, okay, 2 months may be a really inconvenient time, or 3 months may be a really inconvenient time. But from what I'm seeing with people with metastatic disease is that this is really precious time. Like this is really precious time. For some people, they may only have 3 months left of their life, and they had to give up things like a vacation because we can't travel. They may have had to give up that family reunion because we can't be together. They may have had to give up the the weekly coffee date that they had with some of their friends because we can't go into coffee shops or it's not safe given our immune system. So these are really big consequences and losses that people are feeling right now who are living with metastatic disease. And I also know that my patients that have, so many of you know I've worked my entire career in oncology, but also with a huge emphasis on end of life. And what I have been taught by the dying is what has been the greatest in my living. And one of the things that I've learned from the dying is that a simple and smaller world is a very beautiful world. Like when the noise is turned off of all the things we've worried about or trying to please everybody or whatever that may be, and we focus on who matters and what matters to us most, it's so profound. It is so profound. And with quarantine, those people who and what matters to us, who and what matters to us most aren't necessarily able to physically be present with us. So that in and of itself is a loss. I've seen people get very creative, and I hope you have too, about how to stay connected, because COVID can take a lot of things from us, but it can't take away our connection to people. If you're watching this, the good news is you have access to technology of some kind. I have also seen people start to write those old-fashioned snail mail letters to people. And I've seen a couple of my patients start to agree that they're going to be sending around almost like pen pal cards. It's been pretty cute. So each week they send a card to the next person on the list. And it's actually quite beautiful. We can do texting, we can do different things, but that doesn't take away from that in-person ability to be with the people you want to be with, especially if your time here is limited. And so some things in different states, I don't know where all of you are living, but some things in different states are starting to open up. However, just because they're opening up, some people don't feel comfortable still being together. But I just want to call out that for people living with a metastatic disease, or for people living with an immunosuppressed condition, this time of quarantine is an incredible loss for people. It's more of an inconvenience for the rest of us. And it certainly can be, many of us have had losses. Again, I'm feeling a deep loss that I'm talking to you on a screen and I can't see your faces. That's one of the joys I love about the LBBC conferences, is that there's so much ability to connect for speakers and participants, and that is such a beautiful thing. So yes, I'm feeling that loss, and I'm not going to diminish that because that's big. That's certainly a very big thing. But what I want to say is that your inability to connect with people, not only the conference, but just in your daily lives, please acknowledge that. One of the things that's very helpful with cumulative grief is to write them down or to say them out loud. So you may want to take an opportunity to sit down and write out the things that you feel that you've lost. Go back to your diagnosis. Start with your diagnosis time. That might have been last month. That might have been 6 years ago. That might have been 9 years ago. Whenever it is, but just start listing out those losses. And then share those with somebody. That's so profound, to share those losses with somebody. Not to justify why you feel it's a loss, but to just share it. Because what we do know is grief shared is grief halved. It's cut in half. And that we know that joy shared is joy doubled. So share those with people. You may be surprised at what you find, even when you start listing those things out. They may really surprise you, and you may not have even thought about it, that the ability for you to wear your favorite pair of pants that always bring you comfort, they don't fit now because of either weight gain or weight loss. Some people would say, well, that's kind of silly. Actually, it's not. It's big. It's a very big thing when it comes to our grief and our losses, that we acknowledge, no matter how big or how small we think they are. It's really important that we acknowledge them. And so I want to say that write them out, and then please share them and name them with people. And we're going to talk about quieter losses, or as I've talked about earlier, there's quieter losses, and then there's really loud losses. So in the metastatic breast cancer community, multiple deaths a day, multiple changes in people's treatments a day, multiple people going from NED to progression of disease. These are very, very, very large losses. These are very loud losses. People that you've gotten close to, people that you care so deeply about. And what I think is so incredible is that I have seen many of you very attached to people you've never met in person. And that speaks so much to how we as humans are built for connection, and how we as humans are able to connect when love is the basis. It's so beautiful. And I think that that is so important to remember, that you don't even have to have met somebody in person to grieve the loss of their health or their or their life. So anticipatory grief, you might be feeling this sense of angst and grief and bereavement, even if the person hasn't died yet. And that is very normal. There's actually a term for it. It's called anticipatory grief. We do know that it has a purpose. It kind of helps our mind take in things slowly and helps us start to prepare, and that hopefully the landing is a little softer when we get to that, like if the death actually occurs or the treatment actually ends, whatever that may be. And so that is a really important thing, is to let yourself be there. I recently worked with somebody that said, I am so mad that I have to be spending my time now grieving when she hasn't even died yet. I feel like I'm wasting this precious time while she's alive sitting in this grief. And we were kind of joking. I'm like, boy, wouldn't that be nice if we could choose, like if it was a la carte? Like, okay, here, today I think I'll feel grief, and tomorrow I don't really have time for it, so I'm just gonna put that back on the shelf. That's not how it works, because the minute a diagnosis happens, and the minute somebody you care about is diagnosed, is actually when grief starts. This anticipatory phase doesn't really have a time frame to it. And so of course you're going to start feeling the loss, because even if the person is still physically here, there are things about that relationship or that person that you have lost as time has gone on. And so I understand wanting to embrace every moment of living with this person, but I am of the philosophy that grief is embracing the life, that being with the sadness, being with the anger, being with the confusion, and even the joy. There can be joy in moments as well. Being with all of that is still showing up for that person and enjoying them in your life. If we spend too much time pushing those feelings away and saying, not now, I'll pick you up later, it will have an adverse effect on you. And actually, we do know that grief changes the immune system. It depletes it. But when we are allowing ourselves to be with the grief, name the grief, receive support for the grief, it balances out that effect on the immune system. So there's actually a physiological reason why you would want to be with your grief rather than push it away, because that pushing it away can have adverse effects on us from a physical standpoint. And so naming them, lighting a candle is a beautiful way. Talking about this person. Always say the name when it's a person loss and it's maybe somebody that has died. Say their name, please. It's so important. Say something you remember about that person. We don't want to be forgotten, and that is so important to us. And I think in the metastatic community, in the metastatic breast cancer community, people do a beautiful job of honoring people that have died. It is it's such an incredible thing to see. And I've seen it over and over again over the years, that people honor who this person was to them. They say their name. We have many people in this conference. I can say Judy Erdahl right now, who many of you know, who died last August in 2019 and has had a huge impact on many of you. Judy's name will always be in the forefront of one of my greatest teachers. I have learned so much from Judy. And so, I think that that's a way to honor. It's also okay, and I want to make sure I give people permission, that even with all this collective grief and all that's going on, you get to have moments of joy. And it's okay to laugh even, and take breaks where you want to meditate, take breaks where you want to go for a walk and enjoy a beautiful flower. I think people think that when things are really difficult, they're supposed to suffer in order to prove that this person meant something to them. Suffering and grief aren't the same. Okay, suffering is something almost punitive. It's something that we kind of inflict upon ourselves. Grief is hard enough. We don't have to add any more like guilt and all of that to ourselves. We love deeply, we grieve deeply. We care deeply, we grieve deeply. That is not the same as suffering. And at the hundreds of bedside, thousands of bedside conversations I've had with people who are dying, one of the very common themes that I hear is they want to make sure the people that they love and they care about continue to live, continue to enjoy life. I think that that is so important. So when we're in this cumulative grief right now, we're in this time of isolation and quarantine and things that are threatening us psychologically and things that are threatening us as a society and as a world, it is okay that if pockets of joy arrive or moments of joy arrive in your day, that you hold on to those as well. That is not saying that you didn't honor this person or that you didn't care about this person or, and there's survivor's guilt. That's another thing that I see a lot in the cancer community is that people feel badly that they're doing well or that why are they still alive? They were diagnosed way after the other person. Again, the more we try to make sense of things, the less in the now we are, the less present we are in the body, the less energy we're going to be able to have for healing. And so one of the premises of my talk today will certainly be don't judge your grief. Allow your grief. Don't judge how big you think this should be or why this is. Again, asking the question of why is going to lead you down this rabbit hole. There's really no answers. Really, the answer is because it is. So why does this hurt? Because it does. Why does this feel big to me? Because it is. And I think that these are just really important things to remember. I have worked a lot in this COVID time with people living with cancer and not being able to go to the clinic to get your treatment, not being able to see the people you might see if you're in chemo that you would see on a routine basis. I mean, the losses we could label as huge, but I do really think that one of the greatest losses are not being able to in person communicate and connect and even having a big hug from somebody that makes us feel secure and safe are huge, huge losses that should not be diminished. So again, write those out. Say them to people. Try to find ways that you can connect, be creative and find ways that you can connect, even when right now everything is against us and how we're connecting. We've got a virus, we've got violence, we've got lots of different things going against us, but that cannot take away our love and it cannot take away our need as humans for connection. So be creative in how you connect. Reach out maybe to someone today. If you have the energy, reach out to someone today and ask them how they're doing. And then hopefully in return, they ask you. That sounds so simple and so cliche and yet goes so far. It goes so far. I also think it's really great to talk about things outside of what's going on in the world and outside of the cancer, because we all know that every one of us on this call or on this video or every one of you watching has a life that exists in parallel to COVID, in parallel to metastatic breast cancer, in parallel to these things that are so important. They're the buoy, if you will, when we are experiencing such loss and such cumulative loss, to remember who we are and to remember what we love and who we love can be a really nice antidote to all the incredible loss that people are feeling. I also want you to remember how resilient you are. And, people living with metastatic disease have been through their own quarantine in the way, or kind of their own COVID-19 in the own way, because you know what it's like to have to isolate. You know what it's like already to live with uncertainty. You know what it's like to have a plan and hear one thing, and then the next day it changes. And so you have built a resiliency. And I've seen that come through multiple times when working with people right now who are saying, you know, this is different, but it feels familiar. I know that if we don't feel alone in this, we're going to get through it. I know that if I feel loved, then I feel safe. And I think safety is so big. So we also have to remember that every single one of us has a resiliency that we can rely on. And that doesn't mean we do this alone. That just means we remind ourselves that we can, and that we have the ability to be in this time and still be okay. For the people that are facing the end of their life, that are closer to the end, I want to make sure that your needs are heard very loud, and that relying on, I know some of you watching this are in hospice, but to make sure that you are having communications with your healthcare team to make sure that your needs are being met, that they don't get kind of swept to the side just because we're in this time of crisis. That, you know, and for those of you in grief, I also want to say that on my website, conversationswithkelly.com, I wrote and maybe we can make it available for you guys, but I wrote a document. It's like the COVID-19 grief document. And I wrote it specifically for the funeral industries here in the United States, but it's been circulating a lot in the oncology practices about different ways that you can honor your grief in this time that's very unusual. And because I want everybody's feelings and needs to still be heard. There's no reason they can't be. I know that the majority of the world is focused on one thing right now, or two things, but your life and your dying and the people that you love and their grief, they matter as much right now. And to you, they matter more. And so I want to make sure that you are absolutely given the opportunity to speak and to share love and all of that. So please know, and again, I think that's one of the hardest things also about not being together, because every year at the LBBC conference, I have at least 3 or 4 conversations with people who want to talk to me about things that maybe they haven't felt comfortable talking to their families about, and in terms of end of life. And so we've been able to process that. So please, if that is you and you want, I'm going to be in the live chat in the room, which I know you'll be given information about, but that would certainly be a place that we can connect. And so I hope some of this was helpful. My heart truly is with all of you, and to know that you may not even realize how resilient you are. Maybe you do, but please let me remind you, resilient doesn't mean don't feel it. Resiliency means when we get knocked down from something, whether it's from the cancer, whether it's from something else, that we have the ability to continue on, to pick ourselves back up, to continue living. And I know that all of you have that. I've seen it over and over again. And so we're living in this time where each day we wake up, we don't know. It's very uncertain. It's very messy. It's very scary. And if you think about that, that's a life you've also lived, living with metastatic breast cancer. And that's a life that each day you have navigated. And I think we utilize those tools and we utilize that resiliency to continue to navigate ourselves through this time. So please make sure that your needs are highlighted and acknowledged. Light a candle and say the name of those people that you miss. Name what your losses are, and know that you truly are very, very, very loved and embraced by the people of LBBC. So I will talk to you in the chat room, and I do hope that I will see many of you at a future conference. Thank you again to LBBC. And remember, when you love and care deeply, you will also grieve deeply. And both are absolutely important in life. So much love to everybody.